Welcome to the Very Liberal podcast with me, Lembit, Öpik.
And me, Mark Oaten.
And a lot to discuss during this general election, starting with honest... What?
The fly. Have you not noticed there's a fly in the studio? It just went at me. Can we... I mean, we can keep...
There isn't.
It's our one...
Where is it?
It is just flew in front.
There's no fly.
It's our one viewer. Let's get on with the show. Come on.
You made that up, didn't you?
I didn't. It flew into me. Seriously, it literally flew into me.
All right.
Carry on or we start again?
Oh, carry on. Let's just carry on. Let's just carry on.
Oh.
His little imaginary friend notwithstanding, by the way. As I was saying...
No flies on him.
Oh, hey.
Anyway.
Honesty in politics. The nanny state Gaza.
And I want to talk about those debates. Were they really engaging? Did we learn anything? And I think we need to talk about the future of the Tory party. I mean, it's pretty sure what the result is going to be, but the really interesting thing is what happens post July the 4th.
Okay, let's start with honesty in politics then.
Can we start with honesty about shirts? I mean, this is a liberal podcast and I'm in blue and you're in red. Did you not get the memo? I didn't.
I don't like yellow. I've never really liked the color. They're good for posters, but they're not good for clothes. You get the yellow ties and all that.
They glow orange, but I'm not sure. It's
that's because you're an orange booker.
Yeah, it makes me look pasty as well, but no, maybe not.
No easy way to tell you this, Mark. I'm not going to say. Okay,
honesty.
Turn the lights down, everyone. Turn the lights down.
It might make the fly go away. Honesty in politics. Let's talk about it.
There is no fly.
And there is no honesty in politics at the moment.
But is there? Is there honesty in politics?
There's not. Look, everybody in these debates, everybody throughout the election campaign is saying we need to do this, fix the NHS, we need to stop sewage, we need to sort education out, we need to have a strong defence. Nobody is being transparent and honest about the fact that this will cost money. And I would actually just like one of the parties to turn around and say, do you know what? It's tough times. We actually have to bite the bullet. And instead of promising you tax cuts, which the Conservatives did in their manifesto, they talk about hypothecated taxes to achieve things that need to be done in public services. That is honesty.
What's the least likely thing you expect me to do right now, Mark?
Agree with me.
Praise the Liberal Democrats.
Okay.
I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Go for it.
So unlikely you didn't even get
it.
Yeah. I was really impressed when Ed Davies started talking about the manifesto, not those antics, we've discussed that before, but when he put a suit and tie on and he started talking about the figures, because I found it persuasive. Now, I'm no friend of some of the things the Lib Dems have done in the last decade, but this is one thing he did quite well. I felt persuaded, and I'm a pretty critical person when it comes to this.
It wasn't credible for me, I have to say, talking about closing banking loopholes, making changes to capital gains tax. All of these things don't feel transparent to the electorate. I like the policy we had under Paddy Ashdown, where we said, look, we're going to put a penny on income tax to pay for education. It polled hugely well. I mean, the fact nobody voted for the party was a separate issue.
So it didn't poll that well.
Well, it polled well as an idea. And it may very well be that this is what the parties are thinking. Look, on the face of it, if you say you're going to be honest and put taxes up to pay for public services, will people actually go into the ballot box and vote for that? And probably they've concluded the answer is no. But the electorate can't have it both ways. They can't say you've got to be honest about taxation, but then not like it when you talk about where that tax is coming from.
I was talking about spending. You're right about the fundraising side, because that's where I really don't like it. I don't like what Lib Dems or the others are saying. Windfall taxes, such a cheap get out clause every time. And efficiencies, if they're so easy to find, why on earth has no government found these efficiencies in the last 50 years? So on the spending side, I found Ed Davey plausible. But when it comes to the other side, not only did I find it difficult to believe, but it was a nanny state thing. These said the Lib Dems, your Lib Dems,
and yours.
I know, for the purposes of this criticism, they're yours.
Right.
Said that they're going to ban flights, which are less, which can be done in less than 2.5 hours by train with direct train. That means that you can no longer fly from London to Manchester, even though the planes are cheaper than the trains.
And it's not liberal. It's not liberal taking away that right of choice. The other thing that I disagree with the party on is they've said that on football, for example, they're going to insist that at least 10, I don't know where the figure 10 came from, but 10 Premier League football matches must be on the BBC or ITV free for people to watch. That again is interfering with a model of business, and I don't think you should be micromanaging and telling Sky and BT Sport what they can and cannot do. People should decide if they want to pay for it or not.
Except with one condition. I would agree with this policy if it was always the Leicester City games.
Well,
That'll save you a few bob.
Well, it would have the last few seasons because they weren't in the Premier League, to be fair. But then Labour are also not blameless. They're talking about banning things as well. Their latest idea is to ban, I think it is fizzy drink advertising or
energy drinks for under 16s.
Under 16s. I mean, the amount of people that go to my gym all on energy drinks and they're under 16. And how are you going to police this? How are you going to manage this? Again, it's nanny state. And as a liberal, I don't like it.
Do you take energy drinks, or you just like this normally?
No. I take or Lucasade and other brands are available, but if Lucasade want to sponsor it, because clearly Uber have given up on the idea. But I do take energy drinks when I go, but and they're all available in the gym, and you have vending machines. How on earth are you going to, when you go up to a vending machine, show that your passport that you're over 16?
It's
ridiculous.
Oi, oi, laddie. Yeah. Be off with you now.
But there'll be a voice that comes out of the vending machine. I mean, these ideas are gimmicky, they're nanny state, they're interfering. For goodness sake, political parties, get on and tackle the big issues and don't micromanage how we live our lives.
The good thing is, after all the bamboozling bombast about banning all smoking for 15-year-olds from now on, they just didn't bother putting it through. I liked it very much. So there's that going on. And I do feel that the nanny state thing is tied into the honesty thing. By the way, the other nanny state part is the whole environmental nonsense, which actually tells us we have to be able to live within 15 minutes of our home. It's just all rubbish. And that a lot of this nanny state stuff comes from the green agenda. Maybe we don't want to go into it now.
We don't want to hear your bambasting around how aviation is great.
Where I come from, it's called science. Science. Anyway, I have my moan about that.
You want to talk about international affairs because they've not really come across in this election campaign. People haven't really been talking about the big issues around Gaza and Ukraine, for example.
Because the Uni Party, Tory, Labour, Lib Dem all agree. And Reform, they maybe made some noises about it, but I don't think they want to step out. The one party and the one party leader who's really been good on this, I think, is George Galloway, the Workers' Party, because he said he wanted a ceasefire. He's called it a genocide. Now, whether you agree with the genocide word or not in Gaza, he differentiated from the others. And as for Ukraine, you can't separate the three old parties. And I think that we're making a big mistake there. But because you have to negotiate to a solution in the end.
But do you think these issues actually shift votes when you're talking about really targeting people's minds around, say, the NHS and the economy for July the 4th? Is it really the case that any of these issues can shift some votes for those particular parties? Is that not why it's not on the agenda?
Yes, for a niche. And I think George Galloway won the by-election precisely because he said ceasefire, and the Labour Party will have lost tons of votes by looking like they're supporting the Israeli initiative. And if you speak to Muslims, a lot of fairly moderate Muslims I know think that Labour's got it completely wrong. And also, by the way, the Greens, who are also in favour of ceasefire, I think they did quite well in the local elections back in May, but not because of their green agenda, but because it was a protest vote against war.
I certainly think it's the case. I mean, talking to some of the candidates that I'm supporting during the election campaign, that individual candidates are getting lots of letters asking for their personal views, particularly on Gaza. And we've seen also with the culture of protests taking place that this is the kind of issue which will get people marching, talking, shouting. And in fact, one of the themes of this campaign has been people protesting a little bit more. I mean, whether it's with a milkshake over Nigel Farage.
And concrete. It was, basically, I mean, he had some concrete ideas, but they took it literally and chucked some sort of cement over him. I just hate that. I loathe the fact that some respect has been lost. I think it's getting worse. I think now it's more dangerous to be a politician and an MP than when we were there. That's not good for democracy.
I mean, again, as a liberal, you obviously defend the right for people to have strong views. I would defend the right of people to shout and scream at me. Would I defend the right of them to throw stuff over me? Of course not. That is breaking the law. But I think the real protest is happening secretly on platforms, on social media, where the amount of abuse that the candidates are getting and the comments that are made are pretty vitriolic.
I don't mind that, though. I mean, that's just words on a page. It's if they actually incite people to attack. I mean, David Amos, friend of both of ours, he was stabbed to death. His crime being a politician. That was it. And others, our friend down in Cheltenham, he came across, Nigel Jones.
Yeah.
His assistant was murdered in front of him,
and
his hands were lacerated by somebody. For me, that is a problem, and I think it's getting worse. Perhaps because we ourselves are not exactly blameless as a country in terms of who we've been supporting. If you go along in a war like in Gaza, where between 2 and 4% of the population, depending whose figures you believe, have been killed, most of them civilians, children, women. In a way, we're saying, well, we're doing it to you. And it could be that there's a backlash here. They don't come over here, but there are people who are sympathetic who end up using it as a green light. Doesn't make it right, but I think that's a dynamic.
But I think there's certainly a lot of distrust in politics. Again, knocking on the few doors that I have been, the level of hatred towards politicians is high, not necessarily as the individuals. They often quite like their MP or the candidate, but collectively they feel let down. They haven't forgotten about Partygate either. They talk back and say, look, you know, you politicians, all of you took the piss during COVID, and particularly Boris Johnson. So there is a level of dissatisfaction. I think it's interesting that to some extent Reform will tap into some of that dissatisfaction because they're the new kids on the block at the moment.
Yeah. That is true. I think that Nigel Farage has also got this wonderful, refreshing credibility where nobody expects him to be teetotal. No one expects him to be completely politically correct. So if somebody accuses him of something, he says, well, you know who I am. And it's always true. It's the same thing Donald Trump does.
Yeah, but you get caught out eventually because Boris Johnson had that element, but then he just pushed it too far. And people thought, do you know what? There's only so many times you can sort of ruffle your hair. If only I could actually.
Yes,
okay.
This is real.
There's only sometimes you can sort of do that kind of buffoony larking around. And actually, he came a cropper when he just pushed.
No, he was a hypocrite. No, he came a cropper because he stood there saying, "Look, we've all got to pull together. We've got to go lock down," and he didn't.
Yeah.
And the problem with Matt Hancock, who's a friend of mine, I have to admit, completely screwed it up. It's the health minister who was then caught breaking lockdown in a saucy way. That wasn't the important point, but breaking lockdown after telling us all that we couldn't go and see our aged relatives, even if they were on the desk. But Nigel Farage doesn't do that. He's not a hypocrite.
No, but the damage that the Conservatives have done, not just to themselves, but to political parties in general by distrust, I think is huge. But the damage they're doing to themselves, of course, is enormous. And I think we need to spend a moment on looking at what happens to that party post July the 4th. They're going to lose, but I'm really fascinated by what the dynamics will be on July the 5th. So we assume that Rishi Sunak will resign.
Oh, he has to.
Straight away.
He'll be out the door by the end of the day.
Yeah. But then what do? They suddenly, in this desperate state with maybe 180, 200 MPs, they have to then find a new leader. Maybe some of the potential candidates that would have thrown their hat into the ring, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt, they may have lost their seats. The party may be in a situation where Reform had overtaken them in the opinion polls. We may even, and I think this could happen, have some Tory MPs who get elected who pretty quickly defect to Reform. There's absolute chaos going to take part in that party, and I cannot see them returning to any form of government for at least another decade.
I think they could do it in 5 years, but it's
how?
By very quickly realigning the right. Now, I think this is interesting. We're mentioning Nigel Farage again, the tail that wags the dog. His presence fills a vacuum which has been created by the very Conservative Party that we're discussing. And why? Because people are so disillusioned. It maybe is just part of the corrosion in government. 12 to 18 years is about tops, and then you get punished. But Farage is in the right place at the right time. He can say Brexit hasn't been done correctly. He can say that we had the Prime Minister who didn't even show up for the whole of the D-Day commemorations.
But what does that look like? Does he take over as leader of the Conservative Party? Do Reform take over as the new right-wing party? And then what happens to the sort of the Ken Clarke, Michael Heseltine moderate Conservatives? Do they join the Lib Dems? Is there a realignment?
That has to be a realignment. The only two positions for Farage in a realigned right is number one or number two. And I can't see great number ones coming forward at the moment. Possibly Penny Mordaunt would be able to do it.
May lose their seat.
Well, Suella Braverman's making all the right signals to Farage as a running mate. You can see that. Now, it might seem premature to talk about this now, but this is going to happen really quickly.
It's not, I mean, we are talking a matter of weeks, and they will be straight into this debate. And how they handle it in the early stages. I mean, if I was in their position, I would go for a caretaker leader, and I would try and not put in place my first leader, because for sure, whoever you put into that job is not going to last 6 months. It's going to take a long period for this to all work through.
Well, the word on the
so they need a caretaker.
Well, this is an obvious one. David Cameron.
Lord Cameron.
Lord Cameron, yeah, he could be the temporary leader because let's face it, Sunak already thinks he's the prime minister, which is why he left him behind in Normandy. And he could do it because he doesn't have that long-term political ambition. I think that makes sense. Also, because he's in the House of Lords, not the Commons, he's quite obviously a grandee, somebody who can step to the side.
There may be another job for David Cameron. I mean, if I was Keir Starmer, what better way to demonstrate to the country that I was wanting to unify, I wanted to set politics aside? I have a choice between having David Lammy as my foreign secretary or David Cameron. It would be very clever politics to actually say to the foreign secretary, can you carry on with the job, please?
Great thinking, especially if David Cameron is leader of the Tories. Because it's a uni party. Let's stop pretending. And then Nigel Farage can lead everyone else in the opposition.
And
job done.
On that terrifying note, I think we need to draw it to a conclusion.
Thanks for watching. If you want to give us your comments or see the back issues, go to this place on the internet, and we'll be back again for more news and comment on the Very Liberal podcast. I'm Lembit Öpik.
And I'm Mark Oaten.
See you next time.